You've probably noticed how some people seem to have an almost supernatural control over the environment around them. Whether at work, in their friend group, or during a discussion, they don't shout, they don't plead, they simply withdraw. And everything changes. The energy shifts, people become restless. They start thinking, questioning. Now, imagine if you could do the same. If from now on, you didn't automatically react to everything. If silence in the face of that question became the answer, instead of an explosion, what do you think would happen in your life? And that's the main point of it all. Notice that when you impose limits and stop making yourself emotionally, physically, psychologically available, the world around you goes into crisis. Have you ever wondered why? Because these people are used to controlling you through your reactions, through your impulses, through your predictability. But the moment you choose to withdraw, poof, the game changes. And those people who swore they knew you realize they know absolutely nothing about you. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. And this is what I want you to think about now. When you became inaccessible, who became desperate? Who got irritated? Who tried to provoke you just to feel your emotion again? This says much more about them than about you. And it reveals how much, even without realizing it, you have been manipulated. You keep giving yourself away to please, to keep the peace, to not lose people who, deep down, were never really by your side. And with each forced yes, each immediate response, each emotional reaction, you give away a piece of yourself. And at the end of the day, what's left? Exhaustion, frustration, anxiety. An emptiness so deep, you can't even explain it anymore. But I'll show you why this happens. Because you've made yourself too available to people who don't deserve even a minute of your silence. This video isn't about turning you against the world. It's about reminding you that yes, you can choose yourself. And this whole process begins when you understand silence is more powerful than any argument. From childhood, we are systematically conditioned into a profound misunderstanding of what it means to be valuable. The family dinner table becomes our first classroom in emotional economics, where we learn that love is measured in immediate responses, that worth is calculated through constant accommodation. Your parents praised you when you shared your toys without hesitation, when you answered every call, when you put everyone else's needs before your own budding sense of self. But let's dig deeper into this programming. Think about the messages embedded in children's stories, the ones about self-sacrifice being the highest virtue, about the good child being the one who never causes trouble, who always thinks of others first. We're taught that the hero's journey involves giving until it hurts, and then giving some more. The cultural mythology surrounding good people reinforces this dangerous equation. Your value equals your willingness to deplete yourself for others. This conditioning runs deeper than mere habits. It becomes the blueprint for how we navigate every relationship that follows. It infiltrates our nervous system, creating automatic responses that bypass our conscious mind entirely. When someone makes a request, your body responds with stress chemicals before your brain even processes whether this request serves your highest good. You've been programmed to experience guilt as a physical sensation whenever you consider prioritizing yourself. Society reinforces this programming through 1,000 subtle messages. The friend who calls you selfish when you can't drop everything for their crisis. The workplace that celebrates those who never say no to overtime. The romantic partners who equate your availability with your affection. Religious institutions often amplify this by teaching that self-denial is spiritually superior, that putting yourself last is somehow closer to divine love. But notice how these same institutions are often led by people who have very clear boundaries about their own time and energy. The educational system compounds this by rewarding compliance and people-pleasing while pathologizing healthy assertiveness. The child who questions authority is labeled difficult, while the child who accommodates every demand is labeled mature. We graduate into adulthood believing that our worth is determined by how much discomfort we're willing to absorb from others while asking for nothing in return.
But here's what nobody tells you about this learned behavior. It transforms you into an emotional commodity. You become a resource to be consumed rather than a person to be respected. The very quality that was supposed to make you lovable, your endless availability, slowly erodes the foundation of your identity until you're running on empty, wondering why the tank never seems to fill back up.
This process is so gradual that you don't notice it happening. One compromised boundary leads to another. One ignored need creates space for 10 more to be dismissed. You become the person everyone counts on while forgetting to count on yourself. Your calendar fills with other people's priorities, while your own dreams gather dust in some forgotten corner of your consciousness. This isn't love you've been practicing. It's a sophisticated form of self-abandonment, dressed up in the language of virtue. Every time you override your own needs to meet someone else's expectations, you're participating in your own disappearance. You've been taught that boundaries are walls, when they're actually the foundation upon which genuine relationships are built. The cruel irony is that the more available you make yourself, the less valuable you become to others. Not because you're worth less, but because scarcity creates reverence, while abundance breeds contempt. The psychology of value is counterintuitive. What costs us nothing, we tend to treat as worthless. When you're always there, always ready, always accommodating, you inadvertently teach people that your time, energy, and presence have no cost. When something is always available, it ceases to be precious. And perhaps most devastatingly, you begin to lose touch with your own desires, your own needs, your own voice. You become so skilled at anticipating what others want that you forget how to access what you want. You become fluent in everyone else's emotional language while becoming mute in your own. When you begin to reclaim your energy and set boundaries, you'll witness something fascinating and disturbing: the immediate escalation of manipulation tactics from those around you. The same people who took your availability for granted will suddenly become creative in their attempts to restore the previous dynamic. It's as if you've disrupted an invisible ecosystem that was entirely dependent on your endless giving, and now every organism in that system is fighting for survival. First comes the guilt tripping. Subtle at first, then increasingly aggressive. "You've changed," they'll say, with a tone that suggests change is inherently wrong. They'll reminisce about the old you, the version that never disappointed them, that was always there. What they're really mourning isn't your friendship. It's the loss of their most reliable emotional ATM. They'll use phrases like, "You used to be so," followed by whatever qualities served them best: understanding, supportive, available, caring. Notice they never say, "You used to be so happy," or "You used to be so fulfilled." Then comes the victim narrative. Watch how quickly they position themselves as the wounded party in the story of your self-respect. Your boundary becomes their injury. Your no becomes evidence of your cruelty. They'll paint themselves as abandoned, misunderstood, or betrayed, not because you've actually harmed them, but because you've stopped harming yourself for their benefit. This is emotional manipulation at its most sophisticated. They make you responsible for their emotional regulation while taking zero responsibility for yours. Some will attempt what psychologists call hoovering, named after the vacuum cleaner brand, where they'll suddenly shower you with attention, affection, and promises of change to suck you back into the old dynamic. They'll remember your birthday for the first time in years, offer help they've never offered before, or become uncharacteristically interested in your life. This isn't genuine transformation. It's strategic behavior designed to restore their access to your energy. Others will engage in what's known as triangulation, bringing third parties into the conflict to pressure you back into compliance. They'll tell mutual friends how much you've changed, how worried they are about you, how you've become distant or cold. They're essentially recruiting flying monkeys to do their emotional bidding, turning your social circle into unwitting participants in their campaign to restore your old patterns.
The psychology behind the backlash. Here's what's actually happening on a psychological level. When you change the unspoken rules of a relationship system, you create what psychologists call a homeostatic disruption. Every relationship operates on invisible contracts, agreements about who gives what, when, and how much. These contracts are rarely discussed openly, but are powerfully enforced through social pressure and emotional manipulation. In transactional analysis terms, many of your relationships have been operating from a parent-child dynamic, where others assume the parent role, making demands, setting expectations, while you've accepted the child role, accommodating, pleasing, seeking approval. When you suddenly step into the adult role, making conscious choices about your energy and availability, it threatens their psychological position of power. This disruption feels like an attack to them because in their minds, you're unilaterally changing the terms of engagement without their consent. They experience your boundary setting as abandonment because they've become psychologically dependent on your predictable accommodation. Your growth forces them to confront their own emotional immaturity, and most people will resist that mirror with everything they have.
From a neurological perspective, your changed behavior triggers their threat detection system. The brain's amygdala, which is responsible for processing danger, doesn't distinguish between physical and social threats. When you withdraw your usual availability, their nervous system interprets this as a survival threat, activating fight or flight responses that manifest as anger, panic, or desperate attempts to restore the status quo. The most insidious aspect of this backlash is how it can make you question your own perceptions and needs. This is a form of gaslighting, where the reality of your experience is denied or distorted by others to serve their interests. They'll make you feel like you're being unreasonable for having reasonable expectations, selfish for having basic needs, or dramatic for having normal emotional responses to their behavior. The world doesn't enter crisis because you've become difficult. It enters crisis because you've stopped being controllable. And that reveals the true nature of many relationships that you thought were based on mutual care and respect. The intensity of someone's reaction to your boundaries is often directly proportional to how much they were benefiting from your lack of them. This backlash isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's confirmation that you're finally doing something right. The people who truly care about your well-being will support your growth, even when it's inconvenient for them. Those who react with anger, manipulation, or punishment were never really invested in your happiness. They were invested in your compliance. When you choose conscious withdrawal, you're not abandoning anyone. You're finally choosing to inhabit your own life fully. This isn't retreat, it's strategic repositioning. Like a chess master who steps back to see the entire board, your withdrawal gives you perspective that proximity never could provide. You begin to understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their dysfunction by constantly rescuing them from the consequences of their choices. In the space of silence, you begin to observe patterns that were invisible when you were caught in the whirlwind of constant reaction. You start to notice who only contacts you when they need something, and how quickly they disappear once their need is met. Who becomes agitated when you don't respond immediately, as if your delayed response is a personal attack on their sense of importance. Who questions your loyalty the moment you prioritize your own well-being, revealing that their definition of loyalty requires your self-betrayal. These observations aren't judgments, they're data points that help you understand the true architecture of your relationships. You begin to see the difference between those who appreciate your presence and those who exploit your absence of boundaries. You notice who celebrates your growth and who resents it, who supports your evolution and who sabotages it, who encourages your authenticity and who prefers your performance. The beauty of conscious withdrawal is that it acts as a filtering system that operates on multiple levels. It doesn't push anyone away, it simply stops pulling them toward you through your own emotional labor. It reveals who was drawn to your energy versus who was drawn to your depletion. Those who remain, those who respect your silence and honor your boundaries, reveal themselves to be your true allies, the people who love you enough to want you to love yourself. But withdrawal also creates space for internal transformation that's impossible to achieve while you're constantly managing other people's emotions. In the quiet, you begin to hear your own voice again.
Not the voice that learned to say what others wanted to hear, but the voice that knows your truth. You start to remember dreams you abandoned to make room for other people's priorities. You reconnect with interests you sacrificed to have more time for their demands.
This internal recalibration is profound and necessary. For too long, you've been operating from what psychologists call an external locus of control, believing that your value, worth, and even your emotional state were determined by external factors. Through conscious withdrawal, you begin to develop an internal locus of control, recognizing that your peace, happiness, and sense of purpose come from within and cannot be sustainably sourced from others. This is where Jung's wisdom becomes luminous. When you stop being available to what doesn't serve you, you become available to what does. Think of your life as a garden that has been overrun with weeds for years. Not just any weeds, but invasive species that actively poison the soil and crowd out everything beautiful that tries to grow. Every demanding relationship, every energy-draining obligation, every guilt-driven commitment has been like one of these invasive plants, not just taking up space, but actively making it harder for anything healthy to take root. When you begin the process of conscious withdrawal, you're not destroying the garden, you're becoming a wise gardener who understands that creation requires curation. By pulling out the weeds of toxic availability, you're not creating emptiness, you're creating fertile ground. The flowers of genuine connection, creative expression, and inner peace have been there all along, buried beneath the overgrowth, waiting for the conditions that allow them to flourish. But they needed more than just space. They needed the nutrients that were being stolen by the weeds. Your emotional energy, your mental clarity, your creative spark, your capacity for joy, all of these were being siphoned off by relationships and commitments that gave nothing back. When you reclaim these resources through conscious withdrawal, something magical happens. You don't just become available to what serves you, you become capable of serving what truly matters to you. Your withdrawal doesn't create emptiness, it creates capacity. It doesn't isolate you, it prepares you for connections that don't require you to diminish yourself to participate. When you stop being available to energy vampires, you become available to energy exchangers, people who give as much as they take, who invest in the relationship rather than just withdrawing from it. This isn't selfishness, it's intelligent stewardship of your most precious resource, your life force itself. And when you become a good steward of your own energy, you model for others what healthy self-respect looks like. You give them permission to do the same in their own lives, creating a ripple effect of consciousness that extends far beyond your immediate circle. Before continuing and understanding how you're going to rebuild yourself after all this, leave a sign here for me. Comments below, "I made it this far for me." That way, I'll know you're with us so far and that this message is making sense to you. And take the opportunity, subscribe to the channel to keep receiving content that helps you choose yourself every day. The journey toward authentic self-respect comes with a cost that no one adequately prepares you for. You will be misunderstood, mischaracterized, and sometimes completely misrepresented by people who once claimed to care about you. This isn't a side effect of your transformation. It's an inevitable part of it. You'll watch some relationships dissolve, not because of conflict or betrayal, but because they were built on a version of you that no longer exists. The friend who loved your endless availability will struggle to love your newfound discernment. The family member who appreciated your constant accommodation will interpret your boundaries as rejection. The colleague who relied on your inability to say no will label your self-respect as selfishness. This process involves a complex grief. You're simultaneously mourning the loss of connections while celebrating the discovery of your authentic self. It's the peculiar sadness of outgrowing relationships that once felt essential, but were actually keeping you small.
you'll find yourself missing people who never really saw you, longing for the comfort of being misunderstood in familiar ways rather than risking being misunderstood in new ones. But here's what emerges from this painful metamorphosis: radical self-acceptance. When you've survived being disliked for your boundaries, criticized for your self-respect, and abandoned for your authenticity, you develop an unshakable foundation. You realize that being misunderstood by the wrong people is far better than being understood by them, because their understanding was based on your willingness to betray yourself. The price of being misunderstood includes periods of loneliness that feel absolute. There will be Saturday nights when your phone is quieter because you're no longer available for drama-filled conversations. There will be social gatherings you're not invited to because you've stopped being the emotional caretaker of the group. There will be moments when you question whether you've become too rigid, too boundaried, too selective. But in that questioning, something profound happens. You start to hear your own voice clearly for perhaps the first time in years. Without the constant noise of other people's expectations, needs, and judgments, you begin to discover what you actually think, feel, and want. The silence that once felt like punishment transforms into sanctuary. You learn to distinguish between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is the painful awareness of disconnection. Solitude is the peaceful experience of connection with yourself. Many of the relationships you've lost were actually preventing you from accessing this deeper relationship with your own soul. Not everyone will understand your evolution, and that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to honor the person you're becoming, even when, especially when, others prefer the person you used to be.
After the storm of transformation settles, you discover something remarkable. You've developed an almost supernatural ability to sense where your energy is welcome and where it's merely tolerated. This isn't cynicism, it's wisdom earned through the painful education of giving too much to those who gave too little in return. Your intuition becomes finely calibrated to detect the difference between genuine appreciation and entitled expectation. You begin to understand that solitude and loneliness are entirely different experiences. Loneliness is the ache of disconnection from others. Solitude is the joy of connection with yourself. Many people fear being alone because they've never learned to enjoy their own company. But you've discovered that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with the person in the mirror. This relationship, once neglected and undervalued, becomes the foundation from which all other healthy relationships can grow. Your energy becomes precious to you, not in a hoarding way, but in a sacred way. You recognize it as the force that animates everything meaningful in your life: your creativity, your capacity for love, your ability to contribute to the world, your very essence. When you stop leaking this energy through the cracks of toxic relationships and obligatory commitments, you have enough left over for what truly matters. You become like a wise investor who stops throwing money at failing ventures and instead channels resources toward what actually generates returns. This shift in how you manage your energy creates a ripple effect that transforms every area of your life. Your work becomes more focused and productive because you're not emotionally drained from managing everyone else's problems. Your creativity flourishes because you have mental space that was previously occupied by other people's drama. Your physical health improves because you're no longer carrying the stress of toxic relationships in your body.
This is when the magic happens. With your energy intact and your boundaries clear, you start attracting different types of people. Those who are comfortable with your self-respect. Those who celebrate your growth rather than resent it. Those who understand that your availability is a gift, not a given right. These new connections feel different from the beginning. There's an ease, a reciprocity, a mutual respect that you didn't even know was possible. You discover that healthy relationships don't require you to shrink, perform, or exhaust yourself. In fact, they do the opposite. They energize you, inspire you, and help you become more of who you really are. You realize that
All those years you thought you were bad at relationships, you were actually just bad at toxic relationships. You were trying to make unhealthy dynamics work through sheer force of will and self-sacrifice. The quality of your internal dialogue transforms dramatically. The voice in your head that used to constantly criticize you for not doing enough, not being enough, not giving enough, that voice grows quieter and eventually fades away almost entirely. In its place emerges a kinder, wiser voice that celebrates your growth, acknowledges your efforts, and gently guides you toward choices that serve your highest good. You discover that you don't need the approval of anyone, or anyone, really. The opinion that matters most is your own, and when you're living in alignment with your values rather than others' expectations, that opinion becomes consistently positive. This isn't arrogance. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're honoring your authentic self. You stop looking for validation in external sources because you've learned to generate it internally. The relationships that remain and the new ones that form operate on entirely different principles. Instead of being based on what you can provide, they're built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and healthy interdependence. Instead of depleting you, they energize you. Instead of requiring you to diminish yourself, they encourage your fullest expression. Instead of keeping score of who gives more, they operate from abundance, where everyone's needs are considered and met.
You realize that you didn't lose people when you set boundaries. You lost the exhausting habit of losing yourself and other people. You didn't become unavailable to love. You became unavailable to manipulation disguised as love. You didn't close your heart. You opened it to relationships worthy of what you have to offer. You didn't become selfish. You became self-aware enough to distinguish between healthy giving and compulsive people-pleasing. Your relationship with your own time transforms completely. Hours that were once frittered away on draining phone calls, unnecessary social obligations, and emotional firefighting are now invested in activities that feed your soul, reading books that expand your mind, pursuing hobbies that bring you joy, spending time in nature that restores your spirit, working on projects that align with your deeper purpose. Even your physical spaces begin to reflect this new energy consciousness. You declutter not just your calendar, but your environment, surrounding yourself only with objects, colors, and textures that bring you peace and inspiration. Your home becomes a sanctuary rather than just a place where you collapse after giving everything to everyone else. This is the profound freedom that comes from choosing your energy wisely. Every yes becomes meaningful because every no has been honored. Every relationship becomes nourishing because draining ones are no longer tolerated. Every day becomes yours to design because you're no longer living by default to others' expectations. Every moment becomes an opportunity for joy because you're no longer carrying the weight of everyone else's emotional baggage. You understand now that being highly sensitive to energy isn't a weakness to be overcome, it's a superpower to be cultivated. Your sensitivity becomes your guidance system, helping you navigate toward what serves your highest good and away from what doesn't. You learn to trust your body's reactions, your intuitive insights, your emotional responses as valuable information rather than inconvenient obstacles. You are no longer available to what doesn't serve you. And in that unavailability, you have finally become available to what does. You've learned that true power isn't in your ability to endure mistreatment, it's in your courage to require better. And from this place of aligned authenticity, you discover that you don't need to chase love, success, or fulfillment. When you're truly yourself, these things naturally gravitate toward you. You recognize it as the force that animates everything meaningful in your life, your creativity, your capacity for love, your ability to contribute to the world. When you stop leaking this energy through the cracks of toxic relationships and obligatory commitments, you have enough left over for what truly matters. This is when the magic happens. With your energy intact and your boundaries clear, you start attracting different types of people. Those who are comfortable with your self-respect, those who celebrate your growth rather than resent it,
those who understand that your availability is a gift, not a given right. You discover that you don't need the approval of everyone, or anyone, really. The opinion that matters most is your own, and when you're living in alignment with your values rather than others' expectations, that opinion becomes consistently positive. This isn't arrogance, it's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're honoring your authentic self. The relationships that remain and the new ones that form operate on entirely different principles. Instead of being based on what you can provide, they're built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and healthy interdependence. Instead of depleting you, they energize you. Instead of requiring you to diminish yourself, they encourage your fullest expression. You realize that you didn't lose people when you set boundaries. You lost the exhausting habit of losing yourself in other people. You didn't become unavailable to love. You became unavailable to manipulation disguised as love. You didn't close your heart. You opened it to relationships worthy of what you have to offer. This is the profound freedom that comes from choosing your energy wisely. Every yes becomes meaningful because every no has been honored. Every relationship becomes nourishing because draining ones are no longer tolerated. Every day becomes yours to design because you're no longer living by default to others' expectations. You are no longer available to what doesn't serve you, and in that unavailability, you have finally become available to what does.
So breathe and look honestly at your story. How many times have you given yourself away, hoping someone would finally see what you needed too? How many times have you silenced your pain to keep others' harmony intact? How many times have you made yourself present, even when there was nothing left of you there? It's hard to realize that much of your exhaustion doesn't come from what you do, but from where you insist on staying. You're not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you've distributed yourself entirely in places that never gave you back even half. And now perhaps you're starting to understand that preserving your energy isn't selfishness, it's survival. It's self-love in the form of boundaries. It's the maturity of someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to explain yourself to those who only hear you when you're screaming, nor justify yourself to those who only value your presence when you threaten to leave. You just need to remember one thing. Every time you say no to what exhausts you, you're saying yes to what restores you. And when that yes is finally for you, everything begins to change. Not immediately, not with applause, but silently, like everything that's true. And may you, at the end of each day, choose to be with those who respect even your silence, because that's where the rarest love lives, the kind that doesn't charge for your presence, but honors your essence. And it's there, exactly there, that your healing begins.
If you made it this far, it's because this message found you at the right moment, and perhaps because you really needed to hear this. Since you're here, take a look at our latest video. You're not lost, but you need this path to transformation. In it, you'll understand that you're not as lost as you seem. You just didn't have a clear map until now. But this path exists, and it begins with the simple act of choosing yourself. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is the moment. That way, you won't miss any content that helps you reconnect with who you really are. We'll see you in the next video.